Welcome to the All Things Bright and Beautiful podcast. I'm Jenna DePrima here with my co-host Lydia Shively, and this is a discussion of life, books, and theology from a confessionally reformed Christian perspective.
Welcome back. Today we're joined by James Cary, co-host of the podcast Cooper and Cary Have Words, Sitcom Geeks, and Popcorn Parenting. He's the author of multiple books and a sitcom writer for the BBC. Thank you for joining us today, James. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
So thanks very much for having me. I'm in the UK in the south of England. I'm married with two children and we home educate them. I don't know why I feel obliged to say that. It's much weirder in the UK than it is in the US to home educate your kids. And so I just love comedy. So although I'm a writer, for me, the big interest is comedy rather than writing. So as a kid, I just grew up wanting to watch comedy, and then I wanted to understand comedy. And then if you end up understanding comedy, you just sort of end up trying to write it. So that's kind of what I did. So I'm really interested in comedy, but also I have a Christian faith that I've had since. So I became a Christian at school. I went to a weirdly Christian school and became a Christian there. And so I've spent a lot of time subsequently trying to put these two things together, because the church is not known for its sense of humor, and we are the inventors of cancel culture. So that's kind of been a bit of a running theme in my life.
So can you tell us a bit more about why you started these podcasts?
So I've always been into audio. I was an early adopter of podcasts, and I was talking about podcasts, if I may say so, way before everybody else was. I was listening to podcasts when there were only 10 podcasts, and one of them was This American Life. And I got into This American Life and listened to about 300 episodes of it over the course of a few years. And so I was an early adopter, early advocate. And then when my friend Barry Cooper moved to America, I thought it would be cool to talk to him every week or every 2 weeks about Christian stuff. So that's how Cooper and Cary Have Words came along. And he thought it would just be a flash in the pan, but we're still going a few years later. And then also I do this other podcast called Sitcom Geeks, in which I explain how sitcom works from a really boringly technical point of view. And in a way, that's partly to position myself as an expert in my field. And so, but also I just find it endlessly fascinating to talk about comedy. So this continues the theme of discussing Christianity and discussing comedy in my life. So I guess these podcasts were just grindingly inevitable that they would happen sooner or later.
That's great. I have not actually listened to Sitcom Geeks yet, but I'm gonna have to check it out. But
There's
we've really enjoyed.
Need.
Oh, I probably still will.
Okay.
But Cooper and Cary Have Words has been a great one. I've really enjoyed that, and I really love popcorn parenting. I found it really helpful. I found like some movies that we like. You talked about. I'm probably going to say it wrong. My Neighbor Totoro.
My Neighbor Totoro.
Totoro, yeah. I had never seen that, and we haven't watched it yet, but it's added to our sort of watch list based on the episode that you guys talked about. It sounds so beautiful based on how you guys described it. But so obviously, in that podcast, you talk about children's movies and how to sort of engage them with your kids from a Christian perspective, how to sort of facilitate good conversations with them. So it's clear that sort of the arts are important to you, especially if we can talk more about comedy as a subset of that. But how would you maybe define the arts as a whole?
Wow, I don't know. I'm not really
an easy question to start.
I'm not really a theoretician in that sense, even though I've written this book on comedy. Defining stuff I find really difficult. I think it's one of those things, you know it when you see it. But I mean, someone said, I think it was Ellis Potter, who said art is basically saying this is like that. It's just drawing,
Parallels.
lines between things. And I think there's kind of something in that. So, I mean, virtually everything is art in some way or another, isn't it? It's I don't have everybody read Francis Schaeffer. I don't think I ever did. But I think I read a lot of people who read Schaeffer, so I feel like I have.
You have a good idea.
So I've done some reading on this stuff, but I think once you get into it, if you're regularly reading your Bible and going to church and being part of a Christian community, but then you're also going off to the BBC and writing situation comedy, you kind of have to work out some working theory of what you're doing pretty early on. And it sort of, so the other day somebody sent me a book about comedy. I think it was the Davenant Institute have just re-released some book about comedy. And I didn't understand it. It was drawing on kind of Aristotle and loads of other classical stuff like that. And I just thought, I don't get this. The arts, but the arts I think are really important. And I think one of our long-running things with the Cooper and Cary podcast particularly is the fact that, so Barry, who I do that podcast with, used to be an actor. He's also still a writer. And when the Reformation came along, it felt like virtually everything apart from poetry was pretty much swept away. And that doesn't seem very healthy to me. And because we are artistic beings, and I think it's part of the creation mandate, I think we've been called to produce art, and in whatever ways we can. Then I think this is something that we need to do. But I think we've sort of lost a lot of categories for talking about it. It's not part of our everyday in quite the same way. But then when it is part of the everyday, it's just a secular thing, like watching Stranger Things on Netflix. And as Christians, we're trying to work out how do we respond to that rather than producing art as well.
Yeah. So how would you? That just kind of segues in. How should Christians maybe think about the arts and even like you mentioned, we don't spend very much time producing them. We probably a lot more time is spent on reacting to what's already been produced.
Yeah.
What would you say would be sort of your advice to the average Christian, even of how should we sort of engage with the arts or pursue producing them even?
Yeah, I think reacting is a good one, because I think our problem is that maybe we do react rather than just. I mean, the thing that C.S. Lewis tells you to do is to submit to the art form, which we don't want to do that because it feels like the devil's going to get his hooks into you in some way or another, and that's an irresponsible thing to do. But if somebody has written a play and you want to go and see it, just go and watch the play, and maybe don't even take notes. Maybe just discover whether you thought the play was any good. Did it make you happy? Did it make you angry? Did it make you happy and angry? Alternately or simultaneously, and just kind of own that. Here I am, a British writer, Calvinist, talking about getting emotional, but experience the emotion of it, and then afterwards reflect on it. And I don't think that's something we do. So, in a way, I just wrote this review of Lightyear, the new Pixar movie.
Yeah, I read it. It was great.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But everyone was like, well, what do we do about this lesbian kiss? It's like, that's really not it was like, that's just a part of a much bigger thing that's going on here with regard to gender that's happening in the movie. But just watch the movie first, and then make up your mind about whether you liked it. And so I think sometimes we're filtering stuff before we've even enjoyed it. And a friend of mine, a comedian called Milton Jones, he's a quite well-known comedian in the UK. He used to say a while back that he just used, he did in one weekend, he did two different comedy clubs. He did a Christian men's breakfast in a church, and then that night he did a gay club in central London. And the gay guys just laughed, and the Christian guys just kind of didn't. They just kind of checked everything before they could be seen to be laughing at something. And it was the morning, so it's not that much fun. I mean, no one's that funny before breakfast. But it was just, I thought that was a really telling story of just how Christians are kind of filtering everything all the time. And you just think, I get the intention, but I don't think that's a healthy, mature way to respond to the arts.
So changing gears a little bit, you write in your book, The Sacred Art of Joking, that social media has polarized opinions. You say it has fanned the flames of dissent and turned moral outrage into performance art, which ironically must not be questioned or critiqued. And I believe your book was written in 2019, so even since then, so much has transpired on social media, certainly. So how would you say, do you think social media has affected the arts and then maybe more specifically comedy? Yeah,
so when we say social media, I think we mean Twitter, don't we?
Probably largely, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
So, I think Facebook is still kind of a thing, But it's where, but you know, my kids are never going to use Facebook. You know, I'm 46. My kids are 12 and 14. By the time they're 16, 18, 20, they're not going to want to use Facebook. That's what their dad uses.
Yeah.
And I would happily stop using Facebook if I could. You know, but there are one or two things where it's just like how I communicate with other members of my family. But I think Twitter is a good example of that kind of. It is an art form in itself. And some people know how to do it and some people don't know how to do it. But it definitely, rewards rage. It rewards hot takes. It rewards playing to the crowd. And so in one sense, it's like if you know how to play with that particular bit of fire, then go ahead. You know, it may end up burning your house down. So you might want to be careful about how you use it. But I think... but I think the one thing it does that I was particularly interested in with regards to the book was how you can just now rip something from a context and put it in a argumentative Twitter context and say, "Oh, is this funny?"
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So, well, not
Now
like
it's
that.
not.
It isn't. No. It really is the way you tell them.
Yeah.
So like you can remove the fact that this was a comedy club, it was a midnight, and there were 60 people. They were finding this comedian really funny, and he or she said something within that context where they'd also paid $15 to get in. So they've already kind of given their consent to the fact that this is going to be a particular place where things may be said that aren't appropriate to be said in other places. And then suddenly, if you just sort of rip something from there and put it on the internet so that anyone in the world may immediately view it, and that person could be in Tehran or Riyadh or Islamabad, as well as Washington, D.C. or London or Paris, you think, well, that's kind of that way madness lies, doesn't it? And I guess that's where we are. You know, so I think that's kind of why I was particularly bringing up that aspect of the book. And I think as Christians, we just want to be conscious of that because we hate it when people do that to the Bible. And they say, oh, look at this verse about eating prawns. It's like, do you know what the Old Testament law is and what it's doing and who it's written for and what is, do you know what clean and unclean actually means? And it sounds like it's one thing and it actually kind of isn't that. And so it's really annoying when people do it to us. So we have to kind of do better than doing it in the other way. So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at there with this madness of social media.
I mean, I'll spare us of talking about humor theories. So I actually spent the last year reading a bunch of books about humor theories, and I can't think of anything less funny.
They
so
are the least
boring.
funny books
They're
in the world.
least
Usually
funny.
written by Germans or Danes.
Yes,
as well.
yes, so boring. So we won't go into that. But obviously, I mean, from things that you're saying, obviously you think of humor as a subset of the arts, and the title of your book is The Sacred Art of Joking. But in your book, you talk about how comedy, you even say comedy is based on the truth, and it's sort of this function of truth telling. So why, and in talking about, you were talking about the church and sort of our proclivity for cancel culture, why do you think that if religion is about truth, particularly Christianity, and comedy is about truth telling, why are these at odds so often, do you think?
That's a really good question. I think because comedy is based on truth. I mean, as you say, the art is about making connections, and good art tends to be truthful, and bad art tends to be making connections that aren't real. So when stuff is misfiring, it's just like, I don't know what this person's on about. This doesn't seem to be connecting. This doesn't seem to be true. I think the problem with comedy often is that it's true, and if there's enough truth there, then it's actually quite embarrassing for everybody involved. And that's the other thing about when you laugh at something. If you laugh at something, we heard you. You can't take that back.
It's true.
If an old lady falls over in front of you and you laugh, we know you are a terrible person. You know, so I think it's. I think the fact is that it kind of it lays things bare in a way that we find uncomfortable. And unfortunately, Christian authority, Christian churches, Christian leaders, they kind of want to keep things, fairly tidy. They kind of want to keep things fairly controlled. And I understand the reasons for that. And I have elements of Christian leadership that I understand, so I'm not saying that we should all stick it to the man at every given opportunity, because I'm occasionally I'm the man. But I think, it's when people make jokes, and the reason everyone's so offended by the joke is because it's true. It may be somebody used a rude word and they used an F word or by mistake, and they shouldn't have done. And but there's a hot mic in a church and someone swears by mistake, and everyone knows that that's just kind of unfortunate. But we now know that that their instinct is to swear, and that's not particularly good. And we now think slightly less of them, maybe, or maybe some of us would think more of them because we just think, oh, I had that person on a real pedestal, but actually he just used a horrible word. But I think, when someone, if someone says, my friend April looks like a horse, the problem is if she does look like a horse, then that's when people are going to get upset. No one's going to get upset if she obviously doesn't look like a horse. They just go, what a stupid thing to say that is. But if she does, then I'm mean, because what I've said is true. Do you see what I mean? So I think people have a hard time because comedy feels like an artifice, and therefore it's all made up and it's all not true. Just like the theatre is just a web of lies, But it's like, no, it's not that, isn't it? It's getting at a truth underneath, and I think that's kind of why, an authoritative church wishes to control the narrative, and comedy just like one joke can really, really go an awfully long way. So, it's a bit like, in one sense, lies are also very powerful. That great Winston Churchill line, which is attributed to him, that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. But a joke actually has similar power to completely change the atmosphere in a room.
It's true.
And so, so therefore, be careful. Be careful how you use it.
Do you think there's a place for comedy or humor in preaching, or do you think that that's typically inappropriate or should be used? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it really completely depends on the person preaching, the place they're preaching, and the people they're preaching to. So I've done a little bit of teaching about what preachers can learn from stand-up comedians, but actually it's not how to be funny, because what stand-up comedians know incredibly well is how they come across. They are utterly self-aware, and so they know what their audience is probably thinking at any one given moment. And they know that if they say one thing, they can push the audience in one direction or another direction. So they're incredibly careful with how they use language. But also they are themselves only more so, usually on stage. They're just like so these are all interesting bits of stagecraft to note. But so therefore a preacher who has the capacity to be funny maybe would consider using that. But by and large, I think, again, you just want to be kind of careful how you control it, because it's very easy for that to be self-glorifying rather than glorifying Christ. It's very easy for that to become entertaining and memorable rather than pointing people to Christ. So when I do a live show, which is currently called Water into Wine, where I explain with jokes why Jesus changed water into wine. And it's like a stand-up show, but it's funny. But I call it stand-up theology. But people buy tickets and they come and see it in a church. But I would never preach like that. And so when I'm preaching, I don't preach very often, but on the rare occasions that I do, I usually script it fairly closely, and I basically try not to be funny at all, because I know that my audience already know that I'm quite funny. Anything that's half funny, they'll give the benefit of the doubt and laugh for. So therefore I kind of pare it back. So I think, again, it's just one of these things that could easily dominate. It could easily glorify. It could but it could also make the point really well. So I would never say never. But the thing I'm particularly against is just, I think there's a chapter about it in the book called "Don't Start Your Sermon with a Joke."
Yeah, I remember that one.
Which is just like, oh, don't do that. That's just like some boring joke you've taken off the internet, which has just taken 3 minutes out of your sermon. Can you just tell me about Jesus? Because I can get jokes.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like I know where they are. So tell me about Jesus, please. But anyway, maybe that's so maybe some preachers listening to this going, that's unhelpful.
No, that's very helpful. My husband's a
yes.
preaching pastor, so we talk about this a lot. Talk about these things, and that I think he would have a very similar view to you, and that is very helpful.
Yeah.
I think it can quickly become self-glorifying, but it's not something. I mean, if you're naturally humorous, there's a balance. I think where you need to be yourself in one sense, but in another sense, not purposely glorify yourself. So it's a difficult balance. I think that requires wisdom.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and actually, again, the problem is that people who are young tend to have funny ideas, and they're the ones that want to be the satirists, and they're the ones that want to punch up and stick it to the man. But actually, this is something that has to be mastered and controlled, and into your 30s and 40s, So you need a bit of that arrogance of youth to get you coming up with these ideas, but actually, you do need a bit of wisdom and experience, and that doesn't come naturally to any of us.
Yeah.
That reminds me of in the Sacred Art of Joking, you talk about how you don't believe there should be immutable rules for joking, that sort of kills joking. But I imagine there are people listening to this right now who are like, okay, but there's so many inappropriate jokes out there. Like, how would you say Christians should discern appropriate jokes, or maybe we could say like morally good jokes? Obviously without any hard, fast rules, because you can't quite do that. But how would you know which jokes are wrong to tell, or which jokes maybe should you repent of laughing at? Or is that even a thing?
Yeah. I think occasionally repentance is perfectly fine. And that I always feel sorry for the out-and-out stand-up comedian, because he or she is out there on stage saying stuff, and they might have an idea pop into their head, and they have no idea until they're saying it how that's going to land. And if you have a 2 strikes and you're out policy, then there would be no comedians left. So the very act of saying something out loud is like you just don't know till you've said it. And occasionally there are lines where you think, I can't believe I got away with that. And then there are other times where you just think, all I said was X, Y, and Z, and that's But yeah, I think, some may be even surprised to hear you say that there are obviously no hard and fast rules, and some would say, well, obviously you can't make jokes about this or that. And I don't think that's true, because obviously one would imagine it's hard to be funny about the Holocaust. But there was a movie called Life is Beautiful, which is partly comic, and
Great
it's
movie,
half set in an
It is a
Italian
good movie.
concentration camp. Although, as I think I said in the book, Mel Brooks, the great Mel Brooks, who publicly thanked Hitler in an awards acceptance speech, because obviously, the writer of The Producers and all that kind of stuff is owes quite a lot. He says that Gentiles had no business making Life is Beautiful. That wasn't their story to tell. So he did not appreciate that. And again, who you are to some extent, is the context in which you're telling the joke. So I'm not saying that you can only make jokes about something if you yourself have experienced it. But equally, if you have experienced it, that does give you an authority and a license and a context in which you can tell certain jokes. There are so many of these moving parts so there are various contexts in which things, so obviously it's hard to imagine how you could find the concept of abortion funny. And yet there is a Louis C.K. routine where he is absolutely messing with the audience about what an abortion is. And he's saying to this obviously liberal audience that he has, where he just says, oh, an abortion is like essentially going to the bathroom. But then he just says, or it's taking a human life.
Oh, wow.
And the whole audience are going, what are you doing, Louis? What's happening here? And then he kind of vacillates between, it's either no big deal, or it's kind of murder. Oh no, but it's probably no big deal. But it could be. And so I'm thinking, I mean, I could never do that joke, and I wouldn't want to. But to say that such a joke couldn't be done, you just think, I kind of appreciate him doing a joke like that in that context to probably a predominantly pro-choice audience. I'm just thinking, sure, okay. So the skill of the artist is someone really who takes you somewhere you didn't think you could go, or is able to, you know, so like there are painters who are able to do things with color and light. You just think, well, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. It's like, well, no, it kind of wasn't until this person did it, and they've shown you. So in a way, I think it's, if someone says, I don't see how you could make a joke about X, Y, or Z, you go, well, you're not a comedian, so why would you know that? You know, I don't see how you could rewire a house. Well, no, because you're a comedy writer. You're hopeless with things that are, you know, you'd be electrocuting yourself every 25 minutes. So, yeah, I think that's kind of how these, the context is so important, and yet we just don't want that. We want rules. We're especially evangelicals, reform types. We are Pharisees. You know, that is our besetting sin. We are the kinds of people who would say to Jesus, I don't think you meant to say it like that, did you? And let's not be the bad guys, because they're the guys that killed him.
Yeah.
So can we be on the other team? But I don't know. But even just saying that, some listeners may be just going, well, this is just offensive. But it's just
garbage.
But why are you offended? It's because you know it's sort of true. I don't know.
How this is changing directions just a little bit, but I just am curious to hear your answer. I guess talking about arts as a whole, not just comedy. How, you know, I think going off what you just said, I think a lot of Christians are suspicious of the arts, or they view them as unimportant or maybe irrelevant. How do you think Christians? How should we think about art? How should we interact with it? Why do you think? Do you think it's important? I mean, obviously you do, but why do you think it's important?
I think art is unavoidable.
Yeah.
Life is art. You know, the Bible is art, and you know, I don't know. In the UK, this would be more enraging. But if I said I was a young Earth creationist, some people find that really annoying, and they would say to me, "No, but Genesis 1 is just a poem. Genesis 1 is a poem," and I to which I would now say, maybe life is a poem. Maybe we're living in a poem. And then it's just like, well, what do you mean by that? You're an idiot. But what I mean by that is that life is poetic. You know, we are order makers. God has given us this ability, this hunger, this craving to create order. And in a way, art is ordering the disorder. You know, there's no. So again, it's making connections between things. Does this relate to that? This relates to that. So, and the art that makes us sad generally is the disordered art, which is the anti-art. You know, which is the nihilistic kind of art. And in small doses, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? The sort of art that says, "Is this art?" is interesting. I don't need 100 years of it, which is sort of what we've had, you know, of like, is it Marcel Duchamp who canned his own feces? You know, it's like, okay, that was 100 years ago. Can we get back to drawing now? So, but equally, there are some people who just aren't into art, and that's completely fine. No one's required to have an opinion on art or the arts, although there's probably something that they do like, but they probably don't think it's, you know, says, "Oh, I'm not really into art. I just like music."
Right.
Yeah, I'm not into music. I'm only into country and western. You know, it's like, A, that's music, but B, the lyrics of those songs are just so achingly, you know, it's like, you can't listen to a Johnny Cash song and just like not feel something unless you're probably dead if you're hearing Johnny Cash and you're not feeling anything. So in a way, there's an element of sort of definition here about what people think is art and what it isn't. But isn't it interesting that God doesn't give us lots and lots of rules? He gives us a storybook, a storybook about stories, which contains stories and contains poetry and songs. And then when he comes to earth, what does he do? He tells stories. and he tells parables that are bewildering. You know, what's the parable of the shrewd manager? What is that? You know what I mean? I mean, we're still puzzling it later.
Right.
And whenever anybody explains it to me, I don't buy it. Whatever their explanation is, it's like, no, it's not that. Why is Jesus telling this parable to these people at this point in, I think it's in Luke? And somebody said to me, a guy at Tyndale House, he just said, oh, no, it's simple. It's this or this. And I was like, oh, I don't think that's at all obvious. So even if it's right, I think we are being invited to lean in and then lean out again and go, what? And then lean back in again. So, you know, and Jesus was aware that people would find his parables bewildering. He wasn't telling them to make things clear.
Yeah.
He was telling them so that people would lean in and that some people would lean out, which is obviously something that we find, an idea that we find very not if you're a Calvinist, but people find that idea very troubling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything you're saying applies certainly as well to what we read. You know, we talk a lot about reading and books on this podcast, and we get the question frequently, well, why should we read fiction? Or shouldn't we just read, you know, from Christian, shouldn't we just read Christian nonfiction? We've tried to talk a lot about the value of fiction, and that I think, as you're saying, it does reveal, like Jesus talked in stories and taught in stories, and so it does reveal things, truths about the human condition and human nature, whether we agree with it or not, that nonfiction can't always reveal, you know. So I think that's true really of the arts generally, not just fiction.
Yeah. Interesting you say that, because I'm currently trying to read The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis.
Oh.
It's hard work.
It is. And I think that's why a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah. So, but why would you read it if you've read That Hideous Strength?
Yeah.
So That Hideous Strength is an amazing book, and would, in my view, renders The Abolition of Man redundant.
Yeah.
And the stuff that The Abolition of that Hideous Strength does in terms of, you know, defining relationships between men and women, between the marriage couple, as well as what scientism is trying to do, all that kind of stuff. It's brilliant. It's wonderful. And so actually, it's not just a question of, it's easy to say, it's easier. C.S. Lewis was trying to explain things, and he explained it better in a novel. No, it's easy to understand as a novel. It's actually better expressed as a novel.
Yeah.
And interesting that I've just been listening to some Lewis as an audiobook, his review of 1984. Where he basically says, Animal Farm's way better. Why are people really like 1984? And I don't see it. There's loads of dead wood in 1984. And he could say that because I think Orwell was a bit mean about Lewis as well. So, but you just think, I think that's right, isn't it? And the best exploration of the fall, you know, is the second in the Ransom trilogy, Perelandra, which is just this endless replaying or attempt at replaying the temptation of Eve, and it was so interesting and better than most non-fiction I've read on that subject. So it's not just a means to an end. I think it is an end in itself.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back because you were just talking about how Jesus spoke in parables and in reference to art, but you also in your book say that the Bible portrays Jesus Christ himself as funny. And I listened to, I haven't read The Gospel According to a Sitcom Writer, but I did listen to your episode on it where you were interviewed. And it seems like that book is even more explicitly about how the Bible itself is funny.
Yeah.
And how would you sort of maybe give a short summary of how you landed there? Because I'm not sure many people would offhand agree with you.
Yeah, well, they're wrong, and they should agree with me. But a really good example, which I've only become aware of really recently, is when Jesus feeds the 5,000 in John. So in the Water into Wine show that I'm doing at the moment, I talk a lot about John's Gospel. When you read the feeding of the 5,000, and this huge crowd of people are coming towards Jesus, what does he do? He turns to Philip and just says, where are we going to get bread for all these people? It's like, what's Philip meant to make of that? He doesn't know how this story ends. You can imagine the colour draining from Philip's face. And Jesus is messing with him.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's completely unreasonable for Jesus to expect Philip to have an answer to the question he's making. But he's like, he knows what's going to happen next. And he's kind of excited about it. And he's just kind of having a bit of a laugh with Philip, kind of at Philip's expense to some extent. And Jesus kind of does these things quite a lot. I mean, he says he would have been... People would have found his names funny, that he calls the Pharisees, the whitewashed tombs and the broods of vipers and murderers and things. And so when he is saying, don't pray on the street corners like the Pharisees do, twisting their faces. And you can imagine Jesus twisting his face and, basically doing observational stand-up comedy at that point. And people just like, that is so true. It's funny because it's true. And so, which is not to say, oh yeah, Jesus was a stand-up comedian. I'm
right.
I'm holding a hammer. Everything is a nail. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is Jesus was funny. And it would have been, but also for Jesus to be fully human, he would be funny because our comedy is part of our humanity. And sometimes you do meet people who don't find anything funny. And there's something less than human about that. We don't envy people like that. They kind of make us feel bad. They don't make us feel envious like, oh, wow, I wish I didn't have a sense of humor. We don't, we kind of feel sorry for people like that because it's part of who we are. So the idea that Jesus could be fully human and for it not to be funny, and the idea that Jesus could do amazing miracles and for people not to kind of, almost laugh with that kind of wonderful joy of, like, I can't believe he just did that. When he says, my friend Lazarus is asleep, let's go and wake him up. That's kind of a sick joke, isn't it? To people who don't know what he's about to do. When he says to the little girl, I say to you, get up. It's so he has, again, I just think there are lots of opportunities to see. And actually, there's a lovely little book called The Humour of Christ, which I don't particularly fully agree with, and it's out of print. But it's written by the guy with the best name an author I've ever come across. He's called Elton Trueblood.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I was called Elton Trueblood. But in that book, he says, once you're open to the possibility that Jesus was joking, things look quite different. And there are one or two things that he says that don't make any sense unless you do actually think he is joking. He argues that the parable of the shrewd manager, Jesus is joking, and that he's obviously not commending the behavior of the shrewd manager. I don't buy that. I don't think that's right. But it's not a terrible interpretation. I just happen to think it's incorrect. But I think that's right. That, like, there are things that happen in the Bible that are funny. And I think we're invited to find them funny, and we're not being irreverent by laughing at them.
What do you think? Do you think that there's risks, kind of either on both sides, reading the Bible with humor in mind or not reading it with humor in mind? Do you think that there's risks, if you kind of land on either one of those extremes?
Yeah, I think we're not that much in danger of landing on the extreme of we're finding it too funny. That's a nice problem to have that I think we're 100 years away from having. So, but what's most interesting is whenever somebody reads scripture really well, the thing you most notice about it is that it's actually funnier than you thought it was. And there's much more character stuff going on. There's much more of a running joke going on. Because we only read 12 verses that is then going to be preached on and explained within an inch of its life. If you read 5 chapters in a row, you'll see callbacks and things and bits and moments, that just kind of is comic. It's maybe not always laugh out loud funny, but I've seen there's this guy called Bruce Kuhn who just literally performs a gospel. He just does it. He's a former Broadway actor, and he just performs a gospel, doesn't change a word of it, and you can hear the audience sort of sniggering at the start, snickering, I believe you call it over there, and you can tell they're thinking, is this funny? Can I, that seemed funny, but I don't think I'm meant to find it funny. And after a while, it's kind of obvious that it is funny. When the angels say for the 3rd time, fear not. It's like, it's like an angel appears and people are on the ground again. And the angel's like, it's fine. Don't worry. Fear not. But you don't get that if you just chunk it up and just do the readings 1 week apart. So, but equally, we're not using the Bible for gags. And you can again read the Bible in church in a way that draws attention to yourself, which I would say is not something we would want to do.
Right.
But if we spent 1/10 of the amount of time reading scripture that we spend on music, then our scripture reading would be 50 times better than it is. Our musicians rehearse. We should try that, reading the Bible aloud. Try rehearsing, try taking notes, try someone saying, oh, could you emphasize this more than that? Or could you hit that word harder? Could you, those verses go together, that leads into that. And if you've read the Bible well, the sermon is, you can get so much further, so much faster with the sermon, because the sense of the passage is completely clear. You don't have to reiterate it.
Right.
So yeah, and if people end up laughing slightly more and having a slightly nicer time than they might otherwise, then do you know what? I could probably live with that. It's preferable to our current situation, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you think that sort of kind of going back to Jenna's earlier question about sort of how social media and this sort of outrage culture and the kind of like we were talking about earlier, the conflict between religion and comedy, and just that if comedy is telling the truth, we kind of don't want the truth told, is a little bit of our tendency towards being offended. Is that like a lack of humility? And perhaps if we were more humble, we would take ourselves less seriously and maybe be able to take the joke and then maybe even internalize what it's showing us and change accordingly.
Yeah, totally that. Yes, I'd like to pass that thought off as my own in some way. But yeah, no, I think what you're saying is right. I think we just need to, again, submit to the art, relax. Yeah. This isn't anything that Jesus hasn't heard before. This is like we don't need to protect Jesus. So he can deal with this, and every single thing that's done and will be done and has been done and said and thought will be judged. And so that's all been taken care of. So we don't need to get tribal. We don't need to get defensive. Our first reaction, should be to listen and say, is there anything in it? And then the next reaction would be, I don't think I would have said that. And then another reaction would have been, but actually that person probably can get away with stuff in a way that I probably couldn't. Or, just like there are some people who are amazing at evangelism and they ask evangelistic questions that we would never ask. And they can just get away with it, and they think that that's an appropriate way to talk to somebody, and we're like cringing in the corner.
That's so true.
Yeah, and that's their gifting. That's something that they have. But I think our problem is that we are particularly tribal and divided. That we start defending the team. And again, that's what Jesus' enemies did. They were defending the team. They were defending the Sanhedrin. They were defending the temple. They were defending the priests. It's like, don't defend a team. Equally, we don't want to throw Christians under the bus. It's very easy just to sort of, be disloyal. In fact, I think loyalty is a great underrated virtue. My favorite thing, though, is always... in terms of the Babylon Bee, and in the days when you could get it on Facebook, the comments section under that was always priceless, because if there were, usually there's 30 comments that all go, this is funny, 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 and someone then just says, I normally find the Babylon Bee funny, but I just don't think that this is appropriate.
This is too far, yeah.
And it's like, it's a joke about Methodists. Oh, you're a Methodist. Oh, I see. Oh, right, okay. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're happy to laugh at Calvinists or, or Joel Osteen or whatever. Right. So I think you're right, though. I think that comes literally from pride, and I think we just need to kind of get over ourselves and just go, is it, so I love that Babylon Bee joke about during a Presbyterian service, motion sensors kick in and switch off the lights during the service because literally nobody's moved. I can't remember what the joke is, but it was basically, motion sensors mean nothing's moving, click, everything goes off during a presentation. And you say, yeah, fair enough, yeah.
It's true.
There is a way of doing it. But again, that, in a way, that comes back to what is the relationship between the joker and the joked about and the hearer. And you get to say jokes about certain people in certain ways in certain places that other people don't. Sometimes they get that wrong and they tell a joke that's not for them to tell. That's not the biggest crime in the world. Sometimes, we get it wrong. There is an asymmetry to jokes,
Right.
because if they involve particular people groups, and we want it to be fair that everyone gets to tell the same jokes in any situation. It's just not how it works.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we love asking our guests what they're currently reading that they're enjoying, or some of their favorite books that they have read. What are a few things maybe you're reading or that you have read recently that you are enjoying?
So book-wise, American listeners will be thrilled with this. I'm reading The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Wow. Look at that.
Wow, correct. Thank you. I
couldn't finish that one.
Oh, okay. Weirdly, I know what you mean, but I find it oddly compelling. It feels, I can't quite work out what her overall point is. I think she's trying to normalize a certain set of characteristics that I think are probably not to be glorified. But equally, I know in America, Ayn Rand has quite a large amount of traction, especially amongst conservative/libertarians. I find her unbelievably creepy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pictures, in pictures, she looks like a witch. But I've heard John Piper give a little talk about how helpful Ayn Rand is.
Wow.
And it's like, what? Really? What? Objectivist Ayn Rand. You're fine. It's like, sure, okay. But I find the characters really compelling because at least two of them are total psychos.
Yes.
So I find that kind of. In fact, I think we're probably up to 3 psychos now. So I'm reading that. I'm also reading. I've got about 9 books on the go, which is a bit of a problem. But I'm also reading Going to Church in Medieval England, which is a recent UK book. I'm really interested. So I studied a lot of Reformation stuff, so I'm kind of all fine with all that. But again, there's a tendency amongst our team to say between Augustine and the Reformation, there was nothing.
Nothing existed.
There was only darkness. And whilst the medieval church in England was undoubtedly, prone to false teaching, and there were doctrines that I would obviously think are wrong, and I still think are wrong. What was it actually like? So there's a book, it's quite a detailed book about what it is. And, you guys know that in every single village across the whole of England, there is a medieval church, pretty much, that dates back to the 12th century.
It's crazy.
So I'm reading that. I'm trying to read Cynical Discourses by James Lindsay and that other lady. And I'm also reading a book about, it's called The Real Great Escape. So, the movie, The Great Escape?
Yeah, I love the movie.
Yeah. I went to a talk the other day by a guy who's written a book about, this is the actual story. And it's way more interesting than the kind of slightly heroic, one-sided version that we get. So reading that and a whole bunch of other things. I can't work out if I need to get a bookshelf in my bedroom or whether that's the worst thing I should do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll feed the habit that you already have.
Because on the windowsill, I've already got about 30 books that I've either read or would like to read.
Yeah.
And it's already getting quite dark in there. So I don't quite know whether that means I need a bookshelf or whether I need to just get them all out of there. I'm not sure. So those are the kinds of things I think I'm reading at the moment. There's probably some other howlingly obvious thing that I should be mentioning. But and I also, in terms of watching, I know that TV doesn't exist for you guys, but I really did like the last series of Stranger Things.
Yes, my husband and I just finished it. We really enjoyed it.
We
too.
haven't watched it yet.
It's great.
It is good, yeah.
It's
there's
just,
a lot of, I think there's
also,
a lot of spiritual, things that you can pull out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but also I like the fact that evil is evil in it, and we're not invited to feel sympathy for the devil. So yeah, that's kind of good. And it's the retro 80s. I'm 46, so this is absolute catnip for people like me. Because also what you guys don't know is that in the 80s in the UK, everybody wished that they were in America.
Okay.
Oh, how funny. I mean, we did have a good run in the 80s.
Yeah. Everyone over here just assumed that America was one permanent John Hughes movie.
Okay.
Right. That it was basically Ferris Bueller.
Right. Obviously. Yes.
And but it kind of taps into a bit of that. As well, so that's why I'm particularly affectionate.
Yeah.
For it.
Do you have any other projects currently in the works? And are there any ways that our listeners can keep up with you besides we'll link all of your podcasts and all that in the show notes.
That's right. My Bewildering in Air podcast. So I have a Substack like every other human being. And if you don't yet have a Substack, you will do by the end of 2025, I think, if current trends continue. But I weekly write a thing there, which is about stuff that I'm interested in or thinking about. And some of it is also promoting this live show I'm doing in the UK called Water into Wine. And I'm thinking about a new show like that. But also I've sort of realised that I need to get back to trying to write actual sitcoms for the TV, and that I've started taking my eye off the ball. So my short-term project is to build a desk, which is currently in pieces over in the corner of my room, on which I will create some situation comedies, I hope. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm particularly working on. But I wrote a second book called The Gospel According to a Sitcom Writer. Whether I write a third book, I don't know, because they just don't make any money. So at the moment, you have to really want to write a book, and I really wanted to write those 2 books that I wrote. Yeah. And eventually something will grab me and make me want to write a third book. But at the moment, I'm not seeking to write a third book at the moment. Okay. Unless somebody drove a lorry load of money up to my house to tell me to buy a book, but that's not.
That doesn't, typically happen.
It would only happen if I changed my name to Stephen King.
Right.
I think that's the only way that would happen.
Yeah, true. Good point. Well, we really appreciate your time today. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And like Lydia said, we'll link the podcast and everything that you're doing so that our listeners can keep up with you. But yeah, thank you so much. We appreciated our conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for having me. Cheerio.
Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like access to more resources, we have a website at allthingspodcast.org. We hope that you'll join us for our next episode.